Well, as you know by now, the Independent Chevelle is officially retired from burnout competitions. No more, but don't fret, the car will be back, just in a different capacity sometime in the future. Now, guys having way too much fun doing burnout competitions, well, burnouts in general, let's be honest. So that means we gotta build a different rig. But I gotta start thinking, I gotta have something with some rigidity, strength, durability, reliability. Everything this vehicle is not, basically. And then I started thinking even more. Like a lot of thinking. Wouldn't it be cool if it already had bars in it? Or like a cage, like lots of bars, you know, in case I hit the wall or something. And wouldn't it be neat if I didn't really care if I dented the sides in, and then the deal of a lifetime fell into my lap? This, some year, it's a cat eye, allegedly, so 03 up, Chevrolet Silverado NASCAR truck just popped up. So I went ahead and snagged on it. Hooked up the Traymore, drove through the pouring rain for about 6 hours to pick up this beautiful machine. And then I got there and, well, it turns out it's more like this. Some assembly required, but it's fine. Let's make a burnout rig, huh? Yeah. Oh boy, really done her this time. Don't tell Jessica that though. Still a great buy. Now, to be fair, the feller I bought this from seems like a really nice guy. He's out of town working, was at a friend's house. There was supposed to be a shift machine and metal and bumpers and stuff that just, there was miscommunication or something. So he's working hard to come through on that. But in the meantime, this needs to run pretty quickly here. And I think I have a plan, or at least an idea in my head, what I want to do with this rig. So let's walk around this. I'll show you what we're working with. I'm going to lay the plan out for you guys. See what you guys think about that. Of course, you can comment down below at any time. I like reading through those, scanning the peepers on them. And then I'll kind of start showing you some parts and pieces, and we got to dig into this thing because we got a burnout competition coming up really quick in Bradenton, Florida at the Freedom Factory. I'd really like to debut it there if we can. So let's see what we got here. The guy does not have an official name yet for the rig. Right now, this is what I'm calling it. So I had a friend coming over and I said, hey, look what I bought, huh? And he goes, yeah, you bought some scaffolding. Sweet. I mean, he's not wrong, basically. So I've been calling it the Scaffolding Silverado for now, but if you guys come up with some ideas along this build, bleep bloop them. We'll go from there, but let's take a walk around this thing. It's actually really interesting. The very first thing is the frame. So we'll kind of look close at all the goodies here in a second, but very first thing I noticed was this looks like an A-body frame that they built this truck off of, essentially. Here's the trailing arms, right? Control arms, springs. It looks like a chopped A-body frame that turned into a pick-em-up truck. They kind of cut the spring buckets out of it and stuff like that, but I guess we'll start up front here. This was normally down here, but it got bent up loading her. Then there's supposed to be a big, you know, more bars up here for like a bumper replaceable crash impact zone thing. And I'm assuming something for a rad, or all that's missing. So that's good, you know. It's got discalators in the front and modified control arms, tubular uppers. It's got the go left camber on her. Some fancy shockulators. Don't know nothing about them. You could put turns into everything on this. See there for that, and then also you can adjust the sway bar up here. Pretty unique steering setup. You definitely want to weld on your steering components as much as possible. So check, that's done. Also pretty neat is the refrigerator water lines that plug into the nice Wilwood dual master cylinder there. So we'll probably definitely keep that if they still work. But maybe even replace those lines. You know, I just don't see, I mean, if that works, I'm gonna put that one in the playbook, believe you me. This is kind of neat. You can kind of see the cockpit of the driver here. And this is the edge of the frame. So really they're sitting against the door, although it looks like they're sitting way in. It's not. They just build this thing out so far. See how far this comes off the frame? A normal A body would be, you know, the body's ending about here. So they really build these things out. And that's for all the door bars over there. So that's kind of neat. We'll work our way over there. All right. Bunch of bracing in there. Got a drive shaft. Probably not going to work. That's all right. This is fiberglass. This actually did have a door on this side, but unscheduled rapid disassembly, even though I had straps around it, that little bugger worked its way out and took the roof off a Chevy Equinox. So we got to add another $2,800 to the price of the truck. That's fine. Moving on, we got a Chevy 10 bolter back here with some sort of custom cover for more fluid capacity with a big old breather thing on it. Some more screw jack coil over the bobbies with some really fancy shocks. It's got limiting chains on it back here. I mean, she's the real deal, wholly in the field. We got a Jazz fuel cell, and that's vented up into here, and it runs through that filter right there and then up along the frame rail. Well, kind of ish anyway. We need to figure out what gear is in this here shortly. We'll get to that though in a minute. It's got some plastic cap on the back, which the front would be the same. These are actually designed, if you didn't know this, especially with like dirt track cars, these are designed to take quite a bit of impact actually for, you know, because Rubbin's racing and whatnot. America Racer. Those are spec'd for a couple different classes down south. They're, you know, just a track tire, basically. I think these are G60-15s. Could be wrong. No, yeah, G60-15. Got some metal on the bottom. She's been reskinned, I don't know how many times. Hard to say. This is neat. Adjustable airflow dynamicals. Not sure, actually. Clutch master, we're gonna get that out of there right away. Got some gauges up in here. Pretty typical stuff. Unfortunately, all the support rods and struts for the paneling up here has been hacked off as well. I think what had happened based on that damage is this got into some sort of forwarder collision. And that would make sense why all this is basically deleted. But again, we got that kind of A-body cross member going on in here. This is solid motor mount. These are, I just call them quick clamps or quick release. There's just a big bolt that goes in here. We're gonna try to actually use that if we can. I'm assuming this was most likely, you know, a small block Chevrolet with a 4-speed. And we're gonna change it to an Agile Magical. Does have a gearbox in it already, which is nice. We are gonna try to use power steering. If possible, we're gonna have to figure out how to do the front end geometries, get it to go more straighter. Inside, well, I got a seat. That's sure, you know, can't fit in it. Free tarp, that's slick. We got some switches. Beep boop, sure. That seems to work still. Oil and water. What else does a guy need? There must have been a tack, I'm assuming, right there. That's gone. Pedals look like that down there. Pretty standard-ish. A couple, you know, pump you up stickers. Still got a window net. The old seatbelt buckle trick. Cage work is pretty decent. I mean, the welds, not too shabby. I mean, when this was constructed, they did a pretty darn decent job. But if you see what I'm talking about now, if we swing this into a wall, yeah, this is going to get a crunch. But look at all this bracing in here. This frame is not going to get twisted up in any way, shape, or form. If we go sliding into a wall, if we swing it into a wall, going to have to do something with nosing it into a wall, but I think we got a pretty good start here. Forgot to show you guys this. That's where they hang weight. See those slots? Get your lead in there, run that bolt down. You can weight the corners up. She's been ran in a couple different classes. I would assume this was changed to go probably into a short track. A lot of these cars get semi-retired and then repurposed into short track stuff. Same thing with, actually have another actual NASCAR sitting over there. And same thing, it got changed into a short track car and lived its life there for a little bit, and then they eventually just get fully retired, which is what this truck is. So I hope to repurpose it again and have a lot of fun with it. Now, I kind of got a plan, and this is what that looks like. Well, if we're gonna build a burnout rig, we gotta go big block. Some of you might instantly recognize this as the Heart of Independence, but it's not the most recent Heart of Independence that now has a 540 in it. This is the budget big block we built way back in the early days in the barn in Wisconsin. It's a board 454, it's actually 460 cubic inches. It's all very basic budget stuff. Even the heads, we did some work on the heads, stainless valves, new springs, stuff like that. I did end up bending a valve. We had just a slight bit of valve and piston, you know, they got an fisticus and bent one of them up, and that's what made me pull this out. Bottom edge should be fine. We need some work with the heads. Still gonna try to do this whole build on a budget, obviously, so we're gonna reuse as much as possible, but we're gonna have to address this. Now, before we get into more details on the engine, let's kind of go through the whole combination here. So we're gonna have a 460 cubic inch big block Chevrolet right here. Behind that, I'm gonna be using a Turbo 400 by Harman Performance transmission. If you remember, that's the transmission in the Independent Chevelle. They're also out of Wisconsin. And that car has thousands of street miles. I don't know how many different drag passes. We ran 9 seconds with the thing, dozens of burnouts, and all around just tomfoolery. It's never been out of the car. I've had zero issues with it. So when I said, we're building another burnout rig, it's the very first call I made. One of those is being made and it's on the way. It should be drop shipped here in a couple days. So that's going to be going behind this. We're going to try to keep the 10 bolt in the rear. Some of you probably just went, 10 bolt? Listen, I think I've proved with Independence, 10 bolt, that's over 1,000 horsepower. We've had zero issues with the 10 bolt cobbled together in the Chevelle. I'm thinking this one should be fine. We'll probably have to change the rear gear out. Now we are going to do multi-port fuel injection. We're going to do the juice squirters on this again. That's what this had before. I really like the control of it, being able to finely tune this thing, because you're running them on the ragged edge, right on red line at all times. You don't want to lean them out. You don't want to run them fat. It's got to be precise. And we're going to be able to do that with the Holley Terminator X system. So that's going to be the brains, is we're going to be putting an updated intake on it, new injectors, different fuel rail, Holley Terminator X. And then we got some other trick stuff we're going to get to as far as accessories, because, well, there's not going to be any. I'm going to build this engine with 0 belts, because belts have been the vein of my existence since we started burnout competitions. I don't know how many seconds and third places I got because we wadded up belts. So no more, but you hear about more of that in the future. Now, I think where a guy wants to start on this whole project is building the engine, or finish building the engine, and then move on to the rest of it. Obviously, this is the heart of the operation. But before we get carried away here now, you know, let's go ahead and hook a chain on this, snag it into the rig, and see if it's even feasible that this big block is going to squeeze between all those bars, and we're going to have enough room for a shift machine and all that. If that's the case, we're going to jump right in, finish this thing up. I'm going to go into detail on some different heads I've got. We're going to go into valve train, specific geometry and stuff like that. There's been a lot of questions on push rod length and setting 0 lash and all that. So we're gonna go ahead and have a refresher on that while I put this together. Hopefully the transmission will show up pretty soon. We can get that dropped and set in. Then you guys know the deal. We just start thrashing. Some of you are still hyperventilating that I'm not using a fuel make it happen around here. Listen, I am a fuel make it happen connoisseur, right? They're in my closet, I'm being honest. But when it comes to swinging around in circles and heavy G-forces and tons of extreme heat and things like that, I mean, you can hear the people that are running carbs in those competitions. The digital injection, guys, it's pretty snazzy. I know, I said it, okay? Get this pole plate on here. We're gonna kinda drop this in. I got the brackets we need that should match or be really close to matching those pedestal motor mounts over there. And we'll see if we can kind of sort-of-ish line this up and start eyeballing some stuff, because we got to figure out header clearance and transmission. And this is one of the dumbest ideas I've had in a long time. Great. Wonder what Sarah Evans is doing. I mean, I don't know. There we go. All right, buddy, back to work. So these are the motor mount brackets right here, and that pedestal essentially just comes right up here, and you run a bolt through this, and that's it. And you can put spacers in here if you need to, lift or lower this or whatever. So we're gonna snug these up nice and tight, and if these align, which we got some movement, boy, that's a huge piece of the puzzle already done. But, you know, Chevrolet, small block to big block, we should be just fine. Fingers crossed. Also, I was looking at this, and I did some measuring, you know, because we got the deep sump oil pan there. They already notched this thing for a road course pan. When we were pulling this engine out of the Chevelle every 48 minutes, that oil pan would snag on that cross member, until I eventually, you know, ran the English wheel on it, also known as a 20-pound sledgehammer, and just finessed her into position. This one we shouldn't have to do that, hopefully. Let me finish the other side. We'll swing this in, see if it fits. Well, I don't know. Let's see what happens. Beeping back. Beep, beep. Okay, sure. All right, Bill, let her down. Bill! Oh, it's just me. Okay. More but less but faster. Wait, I might... Guy's gonna sneak one bolt in over here, and then we can pivot. No, it's science. Agriculture. I don't know, whatever. Food Network. That's definitely wrong. Well, I thought this was a 1/2-inch bolt. Oh, it is. Now, like this. Oil pan looks like it's clearing. Yes! Great news. We might have, oh, the header is gonna be a big, big issue. Uh-oh. Yeah, that's not good. Bring her up a smidge. Probably gonna sit something like that. Big blocks make everything look better. Look at that. It already looks, I can ignore everything else now. It already looks so much better. Here's the problem we're gonna have though. I can already see this. We've got tons of room over here for headers. Maybe a little concerning right here. Not so much here. But on the other side, this is gonna be, I don't know what happened here, but trying to fit a header tube off of this, or a tube's not gonna go through there for sure. So I don't know if we're gonna have to cut that or move it or modify it, or maybe we just put stacks like this. Not quite sure, but anyway, the best news of all, we have tons of room for the transmission. I don't see there being any issue with the accessories because again, we're not going to have any. There's gonna be no belts or nothing up here. Basically just gonna be a water pump. I'll explain more on that later. But this is looking pretty good. Well, I hung onto the long neck for a few minutes and stared at this and then realized I had already mentioned it beforehand. I went ahead and slid this over as far as I could, and I gained a little bit, not a lot. Another issue we have is the refrigerator drinking water line is full on pinched and there's a clamp under there. So the pan is a little deep. We're gonna have to keep that in mind when we set the transmission. The motor angle is gonna have to be basically parallel with the top bar there. I think my Hobo Freight lift is leaking down, is what's going on here. What I'm thinking here is get some shorty or mid-length headers to like a first-gen Camaro, or probably even like a Chevelle. I'm pretty sure this is an A-body frame. And we'll test fit them up, might even loosely bolt them in, and then start trying to drop this in. Another thing we could do for header clearance and oil pan clearance, because of that drinking water line we're pinching off down there, is go ahead and space this up. In fact, this kit comes with some spacers, so you know, if we run a longer bolt, shoot, we can get a ½ an inch out of here if we need to. And if a guy takes the gas axe and just, I don't think we need this thing. I don't know, you just cut all of this out. There'll be a lot of room, you know, for the pipe laters. And then I don't think we'll have any problem figuring out, you know, back there. Big block, Chevrolet powered, NASCAR kind of style truck. Green light. Back on the engine stand she goes. We're going to take the intake and the heads off because we're putting new of both onto this rig. Slightly different setup here. This intake is, you know, it's fine for like normal hot rod stuff, but it's kind of the older style, and the new one I have flows much better. And we're going to be going naturally aspirated, by the way. No boost on this, so it's a naturally aspirated setup. So we're going to need all the HPs we could squeeze out of this thing. Therefore, heads, intake, and a big honking 2000 CFM throttle body is going to help us put that power down. Where did my 9/16 go? I just had it. No, probably not. So you probably think I lost my marbles here. First I'm saying no belts or accessories. Then I'm saying no boostices, naturally aspirated. Then we're doing multi-port. Look, I'm trying to keep this as simple as humanly possible. It's all about reliability, I've learned doing these burnout competitions. You can come out with 11 to 4,000 billion horsepower, but if you can't pop your tires and last the 3 minutes, well, you wasted all that time and money. So we're gonna go in there with some decent horsepower, try to eliminate all the fail points, which I think I've identified. We broke enough stuff, you know what I mean? And see what happens. Okay, this guy comes off. We already inspected this before, and everything looked really good. But we could do that again just for rest assurance, you know. Okay, now. I said that I'd reuse them, and I'm going to, but the new heads we're using call for slightly different studs. So I'm going to put these in a box and on the shelf, and we'll use them some other day. This is going to feel good on my ribs. And, owie. Yep. It's been sitting a long time. I'll show you in a minute. Let's get this other side off. Now, since I'm a hoarder and we reuse everything around here, I had to go through all my old notes when I originally built this thing and find my camshaft specs, because it's a custom grind cam. It's not something you get off the shelf. And then that had a specific valve installed height. And my theory is, I don't think I over-revved this. I think the old timer I set my heads to that put them together in his woodshed might have made a mistake there. And that happens. I'm not, you know, whatever. But if I over-revved it like I thought I did initially, there would have been more than just one slightly bent valve. There would have been chaos, and it only kissed it once. So I think one of the valves, the installed height was incorrect, because it's a paper slipper. is what I'm saying when the valve is down and the piston's up. So we're gonna go ahead and just forego all of this mess. I think I had $800 to $900 into building these 049 heads, which are, you know, decent heads again. But for me to rebuild them again, I think it's just time we step it up a little bit, you know. Karate. Oops. Where am I going with this? Way over here. Great. So this is what she's looking like. This is a fingernail, by the way. That's not any damage. Just needs cleaned up. That is the valve contact right there. And I can raise this up and we'll look closer at it, but I thought it was only once, but it looks like twice. We got a big tap and then a small tap. And that's all it took. Bent valve, I'll show you that bent valve in a second. Got some moisture in here, just from sitting. We're going to clean this up, get all the bugs out of it. Again, the bottom end should be fine. We just got to address the heads. Even going to leave the cam, lifters, all of that. We're just going to be probably changing the push rods because all that geometry is changing. So right here is that bent exhaust valve. All the other ones throughout the engine are fine. And you can see it was just the slightest contact. And when that touched, it bent that puppy open and exhaust valve hung open, no compression. So we were down a hole. I can't remember the last event we ran this at. But that's pretty much it. Now these, I'm gonna throw these on the shelf. I mean, I will eventually reuse these. You know, we've got money in them already. We could just throw another valve in it, check everything over. It's got fresh springs and everything like that. So they're still good. We'll put them on the shelf, use them some other time, but let me show you what we're gonna be upgrading to. Yep, AFR. These are my first ever name brand heads out of the box going on an engine. Excited to be running AFR. Obviously these guys are absolutely legendary. These are the 305 V2 heads. They're 305cc intake. They're 121cc combustion chamber. They're fully assembled. Everything is set in these heads right here. They track them and everything, but this one's specific for that cam, compression, the pistons, everything. The guys were very detailed back and forth with me, so I have a lot of confidence we could just bolt these on and we're not going to have any issues. They even came with the rocker studs and the guide plates and everything like that. So once we get the block cleaned up, get these slapped on, get them torque glass, we'll go ahead and complete the assembly and we'll put some rockers on it. These things look amazing. They've actually been sitting in a box for quite a while. You guys missed it. They're up on the shelf waiting for this day actually. So I'm going to get in here and start gently wire wheeling, cleaning, razor blading. It's going to be quite the process actually. All of this stuff up, I'm going to stuff some rags in here so we don't get any burrs or stuff down on the cam. I might go ahead and lightly buff this out of the piston. Not really concerned about it. It's not like a gouge, it's just a tiny lip, but mazel. Well, here we'll do it while we can. And I'm going to pull the lifters out one more time and just go through them with a fine-tooth comb. Make sure they're all good to go. I don't have much worry there either. Look at all the blown up belt residue just scattered all over this thing. It's been sitting a while. Enough flapping on the jaw, time to get to work. I'm going to wire wheel all this with a fine wire wheel. That's important. Then I'm going to get in here and blow all this out with air, clean up all the cylinder walls, clean up the top of the pistons, lubricate everything, check all the lifters, get all the gunk and junk out of here, and basically get it absolutely prepped to put head gaskets and heads on, and I'll see you then. Well, I think a guy does go ahead and have her just slicked up here. It's looking pretty good, gotta be honest. By the way, the reason this stored so well is when I popped the heads off to do the initial, discovery, what happened, question mark. I went and WD-40'd all the cylinders down, which is a must if you're gonna store something for a while. Checked it over good, no pitting, there's no real damage. There's a couple wear marks, verticals, but we could still see crosshatch in all the cylinders. It's looking healthy. Rotated it multiple times. It had great oil pressure, it wasn't knocking, anything like that. I just did a compression test as a part of routine maintenance as well as cleaning the injectors, and that's when I knew one was down. So it was actually running pretty good. There's where that, used to be. Can't even tell. I just went in there with some SOS pads, all the different flavors, and then buffed on it a little bit. And it's looking really good. Wiped everything out with WD-40, rotated it, made sure to clean all the gunk out of there, hit it with air, hit all of this with carb cleaner, checked all of these out, put some Ultra Slick down on the cam. It's really sticky, tacky, see that? So it doesn't run to the bottom of the engine. It's gonna hang out on this cam. So my plan is, if I don't forget, we're gonna go ahead and rotate this over without ignition or fuel until we build oil pressure, and then we'll fire on it. Don't let me forget, okay? Great. So we're ready to go ahead and move on to head gaskets and get these heads on. By the who's and ways, if you want to see the original video of how this engine was made from scratch, it's still somewhere in the playlist. It's a big block budget build, I think 1 through 3. Check that out. I'm going to cover some of it here, but I might just glaze. It's not a donut. I'm talking like skip over some of it. But I did want to talk about head gaskets again for a minute because this is really commonly overlooked. Now, depending if you're in an industrial engine or marine or automobile or whatever, these puppies are made out of steel and silicone and Teflon and torque and fiberglass and all a combination of 5 of them. There's a lot. You really have to pay attention to not only your application, but the use and the manufacturer's recommendation, either by the block or most importantly, by the head manufacturer, which I'm gonna do in this case. Now we're moving from, just an old cast head or steel head to a machined head. So it's significantly different. This is what I was running, which was a Fel-Pro marine gasket. And the reason I was doing that is we had the right size fire ring, and it's also got a lot of silicone in here, and it's a multi-layer. And I was told that it's good for boost. So that's what we went ahead and did. We're not going to be using that anymore. Here's an example. I just dug some stuff out of the inventory here. This is I believe this is a severe duty Fel-Pro for a truck. Looks somewhat similar, but again, completely different. This one's about the same, just a different fire ring. This is the one I'm going to use, which is a 1071-1 Fel-Pro. This is what's going to go on the engine with the AFR heads. That's the 2 we're going to be using here in a second. And here's an example of a multi-layer steel. We actually initially tried this on this engine. Couple things to really pay attention to here, guys. The compressed thickness of your head gaskets. These are razor thin compared to these big multi-layer gaskets. Well, what that's going to do is change your compression ratio. Yes, that's a thing. It will happen. When you do an actual compression ratio or a calculator or whatever, your head gasket material thickness is a big part of that equation. So make sure you're paying attention to that. Also, the fire ring, we mentioned that. Stock 454 has a 4.25 bore, right? Well, this is punched 30 over, so you add 30. So mine's now 4.280. So you got to make sure that you have a large enough fire ring that you're not impeding your combustion chamber, essentially. Okay, got it? Good, moving on. Just make sure the surfaces are nice and clean. Gonna hang the gaskets on first, then we could gently set these heads on. I'm gonna do one at a time so I don't accidentally, you know me, a little clumsy. Don't wanna drop one of these bad boys. That's a bad 3 years. You know what I mean? Okay, should we start on this side? Sure, I gotta blow some wind in here. I gotta turn these fans down. It's like a hurricane. These are just They're significantly lighter. Okay. Easy. Oh. Okay. Sure. Some of you are saying, why didn't you paint the block? Listen, we spent, I don't know how many days cleaning this block, and then I painted it, and then this is all airbrush. You gotta go back and look. It was a ton of work. I was thinking about painting it flat black, but listen, I don't want to lose the history of this engine. I want everybody to know when they look, well, I don't have a hood or front end, when they glance at the front of the vehicle, that, boom, independence. I like that. I like it a lot. Going with the ARP again. Wish I could reuse the other set, but this head requires a slightly different kit that I picked up here. If you're going to be taking the same head on and off over and over, a lot of folks have been successful reusing the same head bolts, just saying. Now these do have a chamfered side, so be careful. See how that's just flat? Okay, good. See this side? Digs in a little bit. See that? That is because that is made to clear how the fastener is. So you really have to pay attention to that. And the constructions over here say, hey, idiot, it's going to fail if you do that. Otherwise, you get 180,000 PSI of strength the right way. That's what we're going to do. Now, I chased all of these. That's why they look nice and clean and shiny. Chased all of these out, made sure they're nice and clean. And you need to do that to make sure that you're torquing correctly. If you got a bunch of gunk and junk in here, your torque specializationals, which is 3 elbow pops, is not going to be accurate. You might click at 2. You know what I mean? Now, some of these go into water jackets. Boom, 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 boom. Got to pay attention to that. Up here, we're going to be using fastener lube that's provided in these. And the other ones, we're going to be using like a PTA paste number 1 or 2, just a thread sealant, automotive thread sealant. Make sure we ain't getting any water leaking. I'm going to go one at a time back here. Just going to put the box in here and be very careful I don't drop any washers down there. Also, don't let me forget to change the oil on this. And we should also cut open that filter just to be doubly extra sure in caser. Yeah. Well, the guy does have this all torquelated up, and I did it in 2 steps, 35, then went to 70. So now we're going to get to the guide plates and the rocker studs. And this came with the AFR adjustable guide plates. This is what they look like. They got a little bit of adjustability in them, and they go together with this, you know, this thing and the other stuff. And that's kind of what they look like, you know, set in here. Nothing wrong with these. It's just my hands don't work good enough to be fumbling around with all that. So what I did was took the Comp 4806 guide plates out of the old heads. We're going to reuse those. They look like they're going to work just fine. And this is what's recommended for the valve train. They're both 3/8 guides. See here? So in the long run in Hoos, it doesn't really matter. It's just I don't have to fumble around. Going to clean these up just a little bit. I got some never come off juice on them and stuff like that. I'm just going to run the cheek poker across them. Make sure they're nice and clean so we're not dumping a bunch of crud and, you know, debris into our new heads here. And same process, just guides, 7/16 rocker studs, never come off juice, torquelizationals, done. Ran into a little bit of a snag here. It's going to back me up a little bit, but not too bad. I got guides and rocker studs in, but on this side, actually, first of all, the pack that I had was short 2 studs, which was odd. And then one of these was busted. And I don't remember that, how or why that happened. We never had any binding or issues on the old head, so I'm not sure what happened there. So I got to order another one of these. Luckily, I had another set of studs in stock, so I'm okay there. I got those, but I want to get the same guide. I could put one of these in, but I don't know if it's the OCs or the Ds or what. I want them all the same. You know what I mean? So I'm going to wait, order another guide. We'll deal with this later. Since I got to order that, I want to go ahead and move on to measuring our push rod length. This is an extremely vital part of our valve train here. And I got to get that length. There's going to be two different lengths, one for exhaust and one for intake, because I'm going to order those at the same time, because right now we do not have push rods. So let's get down to the nitty gritty of proper rocker arm geometry and how to measure your push rod length. If you want to see this in fine detail, which is rare for me to do, it's part 2 of the budget big block build. I go up on a whiteboard and everything. There's a math and diagrams and pictures, and you could dive in there and see all that in detail. I'm going to kind of go through it fairly quickly here. Common mistake that I see, and this is just my opinion, is folks pick a push rod length and then they try to adjust or get what they feel is rocker arm geometry by adjusting the rocker. A lot of times it's a paint marker on the stem of the valve. They roll the engine over. If there's a line or a travel path close to the center of the valve stem, they go, yep, nailed it, good enough. Now, probably work on a daily driver. You might even throw a little gravel around. I don't know. But what I'm telling you is that's actually not proper rocker arm geometry. It'll work, it's not the best. Actual rocker arm geometry, push rod length is a result of proper rocker arm geometry, is what I'm trying to say. Proper rocker arm geometry is a perfect 90-degree relationship between the rocker and the valve stem itself at mid-lift, or 50%, or half of your duration, basically. So I'm going to show you guys how to do that. We're going to set the rocker first, then we'll measure our push rod length, and we will know that at mid-lift, or halfway through, we have a perfect 90-degree relationship. Our valve is opening correctly, and our valve is closing correctly, and we're going to prevent any damage or issues happening. We're getting everything out of our cam and so forth, and you'll actually see that that travel path is going to be very, very good. Let me show you just really quick, high level, and now I'm going to get this measured up. I got to get some parts ordered. I got you guys right up in here with me. You could probably smell my brute, if I'm being honest. Now, I'm going to go through some of this really quickly, just so you have an understanding of what I'm talking about when I say 90-degree relationship. Well, the valve stem is hard to see. It's inside of here, around the valve spring. We know that that's 90 degrees to this top. So this is essentially flat, or 90 degrees. So I drew a line on this rocker. This is a Comp Ultra Gold 1.7. We're going to be reusing it. There's nothing wrong with these. They're barely used. There's 3 main parts that make up a rocker. The roller tip, out here that rolls, the body or the case, and then the trunnion. The trunnion is the actual pivot point of this rocker arm. Now I drew a line on here. It's probably kind of hard to see, but it's marker, so it can help you visualize a straight line between the trunnion to the roller tip here. So when I say 90 degrees, we can just hold this on here, and if I put this down, that's not 90. That's too excessive. Right about there is 90 degrees to the valve stem. The challenge is the 90 degrees sitting like right now is not mid-lift. We need to do a bunch of math to figure out halfway, and we're going to be making adjustments, and we're going to be using our 7/16 rocker arm stud and our lock as a measurement to figure out precisely half lift here. And eventually this rocker is going to be sitting down more like this, because as it rides the cam lobe and forces this rocker down at mid lift, that's when we want to see this rocker arm at 90 degrees. I put up a really nice 3D illustration for you guys here, so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. So here's a cam lobe, pretend, lifter, push rod, rocker, and valve spring. So at 50%, halfway up the lobe, this is when we want it to be 90 degrees. Here's an example. So when we're 50% up, we want a 90-degree relationship right here, this little elbow. When we're at the base or the bottom of the cam lobe, this is going to be at a different angle or up, because again, we don't care what this angle or relationship is when it's at the base, nor necessarily at the very top of the cam lobe, which will be depressed down. What we're measuring is 50% or that 90%, and we'll know that 0 and 100 is right on the money. So here's how we're gonna do that. So again, we gotta do a little bit of math here. We're trying to establish 90-degree relationship between the rocker arm and basically the bottom or the valve head. They need to be in parallel, and that's what the 90 degrees is at mid-lift. So what I've done here on this particular camshaft, the exhaust gross lift is 0.671. So I've just divided that by 2, so mid-lift or half is 0.336. We need to know that. We're going to use it in a second. Next thing you need to know for your build is, does a guy got 3/8 rocker studs or 7/16? We're going to be using the rocker stud and the rocker nut as our tool for defining our measurement to establish that 90-degree relationship. 3/8 rocker stud has 24 threads per inch or 42 thousandths per turn. So if you turn it one time, it's 42 thousandths. Okay, that's how much you've moved it, either up or down. Turn clockwise or turn counterclockwise. 7/16 is 20 threads per inch or 50 thousandths per turn. So basic steps here is we're going to take 0.336, which is half of my gross lift on the exhaust valve, which is the one we're working on. I'm going to divide that by 50 thousandths because that's our threads per inch, and that gives me 6.71 turns, this number right here. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be establishing our initial 90-degree relationship with the rocker. So the rocker is parallel to the bottom of the valve. We're going to turn that nut down 6.71 turns. That's going to give us this look right here. Because if that rocker were to be, say, 90 degrees like this, if we take half away, it's going to look like this. But now when we turn the engine over and it hits mid-lift, it's going to come back to a perfect 90-degree parallel relationship with the valve at mid-lift. It's all mathematics. It's impossible to get it wrong. All you need to know is your rocker stud and your gross lift on both exhaust and intake, and you can sit here and measure this out. Depending on the engine, you can have 2 different push rods. Some might be close enough to be the same all the way across. So let me show you just super quickly. It's not going to be precise, but I'll just run you through the process of how to set the rocker arm and then how to quickly adjust and measure your push rod length so you can order up custom, proper, precise push rods. Whew. Need a cold snack. Yep. Tool I'm going to be using here is a push rod length checker. This is an old comp one. I've had it for a while. It's actually a little bit too short. Well, it's right on the borderline, so I have to install it in here, but we're going to try to make this work, hopefully. So get your push rod length checker in here. Make sure that your camshaft is on the base lobe, meaning that the lifter in here is all the way down. It's on the bottom of the cam. Okay, get your push rod checker in here, make sure it's recessed into the cup of the lifter correctly and that nothing is binding. Now, first thing we're going to be doing, I got my lock on here, is establishing the initial 90 degrees. And again, we know this valve spring retainer is parallel to the valve in the head. So we can use this as a flat edge. And all I'm going to do is take this nut and make slight adjustments. Make sure you're lifting all the way up into the nut. There's no binding or anything like that in the way. And I'm going to make sure that we're 90 degrees, the trunnion to the roller tip. Take your time, make sure this is precise. I'm going to say right there. Right now, we have established an initial 90-degree relationship between the trunnion, roller tip, valve stem, and the valve. I can let this go, and I don't want you to pay attention to the roller tip relationship to the valve stem. It is completely irrelevant right now, because you would look at that, most hot rodders, old school guys would look at that and say, that is wrong. We're going to take this nut, and remember again, on our exhaust side here, we have 671 gross lift, divided by 2 is 336. We have a 7/16 rocker stud at 20 threads per inch at 50,000. We take 336 divided by 50,000, that's 6.71 turns of this nut. When we do 6.71 turns, we're going to take away 50% of our lift. So when we get to 50% on the cam, this is going to be back into a 90-degree relationship. So let's go ahead and do this. I've put a paint marker on here. It's probably hard to see, but a little splash of yellow right there. So what I'm going to do is 1, 2, 3. Gotta adjust this down. It's good news. 4, 5, 6. This would be half. Almost 3/4. Probably right about there. Now is when we're going to adjust our push rod. See, it's not at 0 lash. See the movement in the rocker? It's going up and down. Let me show you how to establish 0 lash by hand with a push rod. I also have a full video on this, but I'm going to show you more closely so you guys can see this better and hopefully understand it better. I'm going to put a mark on here so we can see this in better detail. So if I spin this, which by the way, push rods spin when an engine is running. If you want to see if you got a bent push rod, put a mark on it like that, or lipstick or fingernail polish, fire your engine up. This should be spinning like this. If it's not, you got something going on with your valve train. Bad lifter, cam lobe, bent push rod, something like that. Anyway, see how this is going up and down? We are not at 0% lash. I'm going to take my tool and adjust it out, or try to with one hand. Okay, I've adjusted this now, and this is no longer moving up and down, but I could still spin it. You don't have to have the intake off if you're just adjusting lash, by the way. I could spin it. I could just start to feel some resistance between this cup and the cup and the lifter down here. But I can no longer move this up and down. So this is 0% lash. If I go any farther, I'm going to start depressing the spring cup and the lifter, and we're beyond 0. So this technically is perfect. Now, watch what happens here when I show you this. Look at that. This is no longer 90 degrees. However, when I roll this engine over, ta-da! There's full lift, back off to base 0. Now all I have to do, back this nut all the way out. I'm going to take a caliper, measure my tool precisely as possible, and that is the push rod length for my exhaust valves and rockers. I'm going to do the same exact thing for intake, get these puppies ordered up tonight. Well, the guy was able to get those push rods and the guide plate ordered. Also had to order another starter because we used that one for independence. So I picked up a, I don't know what it was, Power Master XS 3 million. It's a mini starter, basically. And then I also got a flex plate as well. And I confirmed with Chris Harmon that the transmission is on the way, which is fantastic news. I also got headers on the way. Those are going to be kind of trick. I'll show you those when they get here. Hopefully they work. Fingers crossed up on that. I'm going to turn my attention back to the fuel and some other stuff because we need to get into that rear end. That's the other pinch point we're going to have is the rear gear and the drive shaft. So let's get that cover off, see what gear we have, because if I got to order something, we got to do it now. I don't know if you can see this, but just in the last few minutes, there's thousands and thousands of little baby spiders all over this truck. How did that happen? Might have to change the name of the rig. Look at that. I'll let them be for now. They ain't in the way. Well, let's get this thing up in the air. We'll get a closer look at the design and everything as well, I guess. But we're after that rear end. Wonder what Wayne's up to. I don't know. Well, much of the same mess. Bring a broom. Throttlage. We're not going to be using that either, I don't think. We'll have to figure that out too. Brake bias, could maybe use that, but we're not even going to use the water line to the rear. We don't need rear brakes where we're going. We need to spend some time and just rip everything out of here. None of this is going to get used. None of that in there is going to get used. We've got a drive shaft hoop. That's good. Captain's capsule. That's, you know, that's fine. Sure. It's got some support in here. Seems kind of-ish safe. Got some pretty neat kind of gussets here on both sides. It used to have, maybe this was another loop, I would imagine, back in the day or something like that. Battery box, that's going to get moved as well. So all that needs cut out. Shock relocation, that's fine. We'll leave all the limiting straps. None of that matters, really. For us, we do need to get this fuel cell out of here, and I think the easiest way is just going to be karate. Drop it on both sides. Don't need it, then we'll have tons of room to get up into here, and we can start figuring out what in the devil we're looking at, for sure. Guy needs to be delicate here. We don't want to cut anything we don't needs to. You know what I mean? Sure. Okay. Oh no. What the devil? Blade just flew right out of the thing. I can't see nothing with them on. That hurt the rib cage. Yep. That's what's going on. Ouch. Ah! Sure. I got hoses hanging off. Wires. Go down again? Boy, it's windier than Rosie O'Donnell out there. 35 to 40 sustained with 65 gusts. 70 used to be an F1 back in the day. We got negatives. Ouch. That's okay. Plenty of room in here now. Look at this. All sorts of activities. So now, let's pop this off, see what we got going on in here. We're under a tornado warning. So let's get this rear end open, see what we got. Pretty excited. I think it's gonna be probably high 4s or low 5s. Well, I guess we'll be able to tell if it was doing short track or something else, is what I'm saying. Based on the gear. Boy, they had this puppy glued on here. What in the world? Holy smokes, I ain't ever seen this much rid of. I don't want to bend this all to snot. Why won't you just come out here? We don't know yet. Officially the most stuck diff cover I've ever had in my life. Tornado on the way? Okay. Well, got a tornado on the way. Gonna, I don't know, lay down somewhere. Be back. Finally got her. This is why we're having a tornado shelter put in here. Actually, next week, you can find that at Vice Grip Lodge, which is a lot of the property and building and miscellaneous stuff. You didn't miss nothing here, just a lot of yelling and hammers. Really fresh gear oil, but excessive amount of RTV. Oh yeah, we got some sort of fancy unit back here. I don't think I've ever seen a locker of said flavor. Weird. Hear that? It's like a ratcheting. It's either ratcheting or it's busted, one of the two. Well, the guy's done a bunch of rooting around on this little 10 bolt here, and I think I got it all figured out, or pretty close anyway. I forgot about these two little tags on the bottom of this thing, so it's definitely a GM 7.5 or 7625. They're basically the same thing. And it's got C-clip eliminators on it. And it's got some sort of, I don't know what kind of locker this is. It almost looks like an Eaton locker, but I can't really, I've never seen one exactly like that anyway. It's got a Motive Gear 373 in it. Now that's a great setup for racing and messing around, but not gonna work for us. We're gonna need a highway gear, like a 308 or even in the 2s. The goal is to have the rear tires spinning about 150 to 160 miles an hour in final gear. We want to pop those tires as fast as possible. So we're going to have to re-gear this thing, and it's going to be a mess getting this apart and just trying to decipher what we need. Thankfully, I believe, as long as you can count the splines on the axle, we can figure out for sure which one it is. But I think you can intermix 7.5 and 7.65 gears as long as you're doing ring and pinion at the same time. So that's a whole nother project right there. I am gonna do a little bit more research and get some more stuff ordered in there. Well, we've got a lot done on our project here, but unfortunately, I'm out of parts. It's a hurry up and wait game at this point. I've got a bunch of stuff already ordered, should be here any minute, plus everything we just figured out we need to order. So I'm at a standstill. Gonna clean up and wait for that. Thank you guys for watching, appreciate it very much. As always, please leave your ideas, comments, suggestions down there below, and we'll see you guys very, very soon for part 2. Oh, what a mess.